So welcome to the second day of the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub. My name is Chris. I am joining you from Norway together with the Urban Systems team and our partners from all over the world. Right now we have people connecting in from Norway, from Latin America, from the US, and of course from all over Canada. And just a final for the last few people that just logged in, if at all possible, update your name in your Zoom window so we know who people are talking to once we get started. So welcome, and Jerome, do you want to share a few observations from day number one, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks again to all of you who were with us yesterday, and it was a great session. The 2 hours went by very quickly because it was pretty action-packed. We took in a lot of information at the beginning and then really got into the Miro board in our breakout groups and received a lot of really good feedback and information to help guide the project. I want to thank all of you who were with us yesterday for that. We've got all of that data captured and are now distilling it. We could already see some themes emerging through that, which is great. And we'll continue to work with what we find today to nail this down. And yeah, just wanted to stress the importance of what all of you are doing here. It's not a sit down and listen kind of session. We'll have a couple of quick introductions to kind of prime the pump and then and get things flowing. And really, this is all about you contributing to helping build the Ocean Futures Hub. So thank you so much for all the ideas yesterday, and we hope to capture a lot more in these 2 hours. And again, we may have another opportunity in November to, once we have a lot of the that data distilled and what it's going to look like, to help give some final feedback at that point. So, all right, back to you, Chris. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Jerome. And just like you said, it's going to be another action-packed day. We're going to be introducing. We're going to have a couple of guest speakers. Randomly, we have three great women joining us from Norway with very different stories. And then we're going to have you back in those breakout sessions. We're going to have 3 breakout sessions, just like we did yesterday. And I really encourage you to, push the conversation. Chris Campbell, you had some good input in terms of previous initiatives. Let's tie all this together so we can build the foundation that we want to see. Now, one thing that is really important as we get into this is why do we normally, so I'm not talking about the Western Canada example, but why do we normally see clusters and initiatives like this emerge? So we can sort of take 2 key points. So one is what we call the opportunity-based. And the opportunity-based will look out and they will see new markets on the horizon. They will see new opportunities and say, how do we get together and build high growth, high value industries that we don't have today? So those clusters are typically very future focused, and they try to build industries in home markets or export markets that we don't have today. The other one is a little bit more in the present, maybe also in the past. They will say, our industry today have a lot of challenges. How can we collaborate better to solve the challenges of today and also maybe yesterday? And if we put these 2 like this, you would have some clusters on a very general basis that come together because they need to solve industry challenges and transform old industries. So maybe 10 minutes from where I'm sitting, there's a very large cluster focused on transforming oil and gas. And that's their mantra and that's their focus. Another hour from where I'm sitting, there's a cluster focused completely on creating new market opportunities. Now, they may seem similar, but when you get into it, they're very, very different. And the focus, the participants, the energy they bring, very, very different. I want to share one story of a cluster that is shaped exclusively around these new market opportunities. So this is Arvid. Arvid is a lifelong industry builder. He's worked in various offshore activities and quite a common industrial mid-level manager. And Arvid is the champion behind building out the Norwegian offshore wind cluster. Now, this is a brand new initiative. He started it probably about 4 years ago. And since day one, he has been focused on export markets, export market, export markets. His ambition was to build out a supply industry along the Norwegian coastline with technology and software and startups and students and big industrial leaders. So he could actually get people to find these new market opportunities in Korea, in Japan, in the US, in Brazil, and so on. His cluster, and I call it his cluster, is organized around 9 working groups. And those 9 working groups specifically pull the different members together. So you can have industry CEOs, you can have very experienced business developers, you can have government representatives, you can have startups and investors. They all come together and they work in those working groups. Here you see working groups for home market, which is one work package. Opening Ireland and Scotland, opening Spain and Portugal. And you also see towards the bottom here, financing being one of the issues. Specifically, that working group number 7 is working on how do we improve access to funding and financing, both from banks and PE, but also earlier stage initiatives. What is really cool is I have followed his work since day 0. Today, he counts more than 300 members in the last update I saw. And his members range from the biggest industrial companies to law firms, business schools, big energy companies, engineering firms, IT firms, and beyond. He has been able to pull together a lot of firms that wouldn't naturally have a offshore wind initiative. And this matters because he has been working closely with the big company CEOs, and he's been working very closely with how do we help big companies find new market opportunities. So as we get into the day today, you're going to have different perspectives. We're going to talk about big companies, small companies. We're going to talk about startups. We're going to talk about the role of education in universities. But it's really up to you in your conversations to shape what we call the strategy for this initiative. How do we build the hub with the building and the infrastructure? How do we build a cluster? How do we build a collaboration model? And how do we get all of this to work together? And that's the focus for today. We have with us 3 guests. From Catapult Ocean, we have Ingrid Kulstad, who is the CEO, and she operates the Catapult Ocean Accelerator. She's going to talk to you about how they scout globally, and this is the key word here, globally, for the best ocean impact startups in the world. Then we're going to have Christiane Påske from Innovation Norway. She's a special advisor to the Norwegian government cluster program, and she's going to talk extensively about the ocean clusters and how we support them. And then we're going to have Tanya Hull, who you also met yesterday, discussing the role of a Hatch Aquaculture Accelerator. Ingrid, we're going to transition back to you.
Thank you for that, Christian. I will share my screen.
Absolutely.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. So thank you, everyone. And also thank you for the invitation to just come and talk briefly about what we do. I've been told 7 minutes, so I'll try to stick within that time frame. My name is Ingrid. I'm the COO in Catapult Ocean, and we go to work every day trying to fulfill a vision which is a world where thriving ocean is in harmony with economic development. It's a huge, hairy vision, right? But it's something that we felt was needed to help guide us in the efforts and the choices we were taking along the way. We're a fairly young company. We were established in April 2018 as part of a bigger group where our main owner has been working in impact investments for several years already, but identified a need and also a possibility in the Norwegian ocean cluster to have an accelerator focused solely on the ocean industries. So Catapult Ocean was born out of 3 different observations. One is that Norway has a very, very strong ocean community and many very specialized clusters that are open to sharing their networks, knowledge, and insights. But also, secondly, that I think we have a business environment where it is relatively easy for startups to get access and test their ideas. But thirdly, also that there is a big need from a sustainability perspective to really foster change and innovation within the ocean industries. So that's how it all came about. We focus really broadly on the ocean, and we define it in rather broad terms, which also allows us to invest in some land-based activities, as long as they have a positive impact on the state of the ocean, which, for example, could mean that the activity has a significant impact on reducing plastic waste or microplastics entering the ocean systems. Even if it's land-based, it still qualifies within our investment mandate. There has to be a technology component to all the companies, which I think is kind of self-evident in today's world, but it helps us also step away from pure production, for example. So we don't really invest in production facilities as such. So we have a mission, which is to invest in startups that build profitable businesses with a positive impact on the ocean. But then, even though we are not a public cluster in any way, shape, or form, we also see that we have a bit of a societal mission. We're a small company, but we try to think big, and that mission is then to help also catalyze capital, talent, companies, and startups to accelerate the blue shift in the ocean industries. And this is also why I'm participating today, because we really want to spread the enthusiasm and desire for this to others around the world, and help inspire new actors also to step up and help startups with a sustainability focus within the ocean space prosper. And then finally, once we invested in startups, it's part of our mission to then help them steward their initiatives even more towards the sustainable development goals. For some, that comes naturally, and it's been intrinsic from day one. For others, it's a bit more of a learning journey and something they need help on identifying the full potential of their applications, for example. So far, since we were established in 2018, we have invested in 32 companies from all over the world. And a lot of people ask us, why do you scout globally, and what's the point of that? Well, I mean, I guess you could say it's making life difficult, but it's also about recognizing the fact that if you want to build strong clusters, you can't just, we actually think that you have to look also beyond your natural geographical boundaries in order to challenge the homegrown competence and technology sectors. So we think, the quest for a more healthy ocean is something that can only be solved globally, and we need to find talent wherever they are. I think another important element here as well is that when you work with sustainability, some solutions cannot be exported and just delivered. They have to come from the community and the society and the country where the problem is. Some of the biggest sustainability challenges might have rather simple solutions. As an example, we invested in a cold chain company in Kenya that is working to help fishermen preserve their catch on the way from fishing to the market. And many of them lose up to 40% of their catch, which leads to overfishing because they need to replace that waste. The solution that this company came up with could not have been exported from Norway to Kenya. It had to kind of come from the local market, and we want to support those kind of initiatives. But I do think an important element here is also to really, I think if in order to benchmark what you see in your home market, you have to know what's happening in the rest of the world as well. And that's why I think that a global outlook is important. What we offered the startups is investments, but also an accelerator program. You know, sorry, I think there is one slide missing that I just wanted to show to you. Okay, well, we'll go ahead. So what we offer to the startups is an investment. We manage privately raised funds coming from family offices, corporates, from business angels, and some foundations that are interested in impact on the ocean space. That fund invests in startups that we select to participate in the Accelerator program. The ticket size that we operate with is between 150 to 500,000 USD in return for equity, which tends to be around 8%. So that gives an indication that we have a rather flexible scope when it comes to valuations, which is something that we find really important. The way it works is that we manage these funds, invest them into the startups, which then again pay us a program fee to participate in the Accelerator program. But the whole investment is counting towards their valuation. And this is a rather typical setup. You'll find a lot of Accelerator programs operating this way. We have a tiered approach, so we have depending on how big the investment is, the program fee will differ somewhat. But that's the business model until we hopefully make some exits that are interesting. But what we really believe in is that when we invest in seed stage, it's not only money that is important for the startups in order to thrive. They need smart money and they need help. And that's why I think an Accelerator program is really ideal for many startups in that stage. And it's our ambition to really deliver 3 months of high quality content that helps them both understand what are the building blocks that needs to be in place in order to become investable and build a scalable business. But also a way for us to really help our network become aware of the opportunities and innovations that are happening in the space. It used to be on site out of Oslo for 3 months. So we asked people to relocate, leave their families, their teams, their workspaces behind and move to Oslo for 3 months. With COVID, obviously we had to rethink it, and it's a digital program now. And I have to say that I think we will never ever go back to a fully physical program again. I think one of the benefits of going digital is that the companies can really stay close to their team. You don't have to take them out of their home market for too long. So I do think that that's going to continue to be part of our way forward, also post COVID. It's 12 weeks and it has very, very clear deliverables. Each month has a topic that we drill down on, and also ask the startups to do a lot of homework on, which they receive help with our mentor network. So a typical week in the program looks like this. They have some joint sessions, they get one-to-one mentoring and workshops that are following up on the sessions and the deliverables that the startups are asked to do. We also focus a lot on presentation skills and mock investor meetings. Every single startup complains about presentation skills and pitching, and every single one of them is super happy that they have been drilled in that when they start telling the story of their company. So I think that's something that shouldn't be underestimated. What is really important for us through the program is to facilitate peer-to-peer learning. We are fortunate to work with very seasoned founders. The majority of our founders are I would say professionals in their 40s, typically. They have had a career beforehand, they understand the workings in business life, and they have a lot to learn and give to each other as well. So to facilitate that is really important. Just briefly on sourcing and screening, we have 3 ways of finding companies. One is referrals. So we work actively on building a network, both with investors, foundations, corporates, etc. So referrals is a big part of that. We do applications. We're starting to see more and more traction on the application side, but we're still a young company. So we've had to also invest a lot of resources in scouting, which is our main source of deal flow to date. So far, we have looked at several thousand startups over the past 2.5 years. Around 1,400 of them have ended up in our pipeline, in our database, and our companies that we are monitoring and are in dialogue with. These numbers are from last year. We are going to publish an update end of November, where we provide insight into our pipeline and want to share that with the wider ecosystem to show people that, you know, there are a lot of great, exciting startups out there that are just waiting to receive funding or have an open door for a collaboration. 20% of the North American ocean tech startups are Canadian in our pipeline. I think that's important to say. I'm not saying that this is the total picture. I think that is around 3.4% of the total pipeline. That was the number that our head scout gave to me earlier today. So, you know, keep your eyes peeled for the update in about a month's time. This is how the ranking looked like last year. I can tell you that it hasn't changed a lot for this year, but there is some movement in this ranking as well. I know that I'm coming towards an end, but I just want to, you know, mention some lessons learned from the past 2.5 years we've spent building Catapult Ocean. It really is that it takes a village. So we are not an official cluster, right? But our success depends on our ability to work with industry players, with the clusters, with universities, also with business people who have not really like a formal relationship with the ocean, but who can help startups, help them, you know, be coached in more generic business concepts. So building a strong network of partners is absolutely critical to your success, because you will just encounter so many different problems and challenges, and you will need to be able to tap into a lot of different resources as you can build this. I would say that competition is really tough. Getting the great deals is getting increasingly hard. I think more and more people are seeing the value in the ocean industries, but also the big potential there. It's still a lot of low-hanging fruits to be taken with new technology, with new approaches, and more investors are waking up to that. So competition is tough, and I think COVID-19 will only intensify it. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because I think a lot of startups, you know, you really just have to show that you can deliver great value. And that's something we thought a lot about when we had to digitalize our program. You know, one thing is, we know that they can come to Norway, we can give them a great experience, working out of Oslo, getting to know our network, have a personal experience. But with more and more offers moving online, I think you will have to work really hard on maintaining quality, because startups can now tap into resources that are global and situated everywhere. So in many ways, I think COVID-19 has reduced some barriers for contact and interaction. So you have to just make sure that your offer, your network is really up there and is able to compete with the best ones. You need to have investors that understand the startup landscape or who wants to understand the startup landscape. What does that mean? Well, I think most seasoned startup investors, they know that it's a risky business. You will be investing in ventures that ultimately will disappoint you or fail. And you need to have people with you that understand that one success is great, two successes is even better, but you will also have some failures along the way. And understanding that this is not private equity in a really well-established industry. I think that's important to make sure you have the right people with you. I think as an advice to you as you're contemplating developing a cluster is to not keep startups alive for the sake of it. I think we see that sometimes, that there is some artificial life support being given, which I think is not to the benefit of the founder, it's not to the benefit of the community around it. And I think sometimes we maybe have to be better at giving feedback to say, you know what, this is not going to work, this is not going to fly. So I think it's important to have a culture where that is encouraged, to have frank discussions and not keep startups alive for the sake of it. And of course, it's really important to have fun. I know this is something Christian also always emphasizes, but I would also like to say, don't overdo the startup hype. And what do I mean by that? I mean, for us, it's really important to tell our mentors, our partners, ourselves, and the other startups that, we're not in this because it's cool. We're in this because you want to build a serious business that is going to succeed. And by doing that, you have to be really critical about how you spend your time. You don't have to go to all these pitch events. Go to the right pitch events. You don't have to go to crazy startup camps if you don't think it's absolutely necessary for your network. I don't know, I wanted to put it in here, even though I don't know what that landscape looks like in Canada. But for us, it's really important to tell our whole network that these are founders that are putting their savings, their spare time, their whole careers at stake, and they're not, startups are not something fun that you just sprinkle across an ecosystem in order to make it look a bit sexy. And that's something we try to live by in our operations. I don't know if that sums it up, Christian. That was what I had prepared, but I think it's.
Ingrid, this is great. We're already getting some comments from different team members. So this is like spot on for what we were hoping for. So Ingrid, thank you very much, and congratulations on a very, very cool story.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to jump from the startup view to the government view. We're going to have Christiane Påske, who is a special advisor to the Norwegian Cluster Program, share some of the government perspective. Christiane, all yours.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you for this opportunity to share our experiences coming from a governmental point of view. Maybe not as fun as the startup scene, but at least, hopefully, we are also necessary. We have had a cluster program in Norway for the last 15 years. Inspired by Michael Porter and the Competitive of Nations, we back then created a cluster support program aimed at increasing the competitiveness of our most mature and most competitive industries. So in Christian's initial drawing, we were definitely on the side where we were working with already established industries and also with our strongest industries when we put up our first clusters. The clusters, I have to emphasize that, because the clusters, they need to be there, and by that I mean that in order for us to create good cluster policies, we cannot use the policies to build what I would say is the fundamental of the cluster, because the fundamental of the cluster is that there is enough a substantial amount of businesses that sees the need for and want to cooperate. That's the core. So there has to be enough kind of businesses that sees that they can increase their value by increasing their cooperation. And the market failure that we are going to kind of take care of by the governmental support is the fact that not everybody sees the full potential of this cooperation. So if we leave it to the market, we see that the businesses will underinvest in cooperation activities. So this is where we come in. What can we actually do in order to kind of incentivize these businesses in investing more in cooperation? And how can we kind of support that? I joined Innovation Norway 4 years ago, and that I came from the business side, and it was my first assignment in a public company, and it's also my first assignment working with policies. And it's been a bumpy journey, I have to say, and I think maybe first of all it's given me a different perspective on being patient. Because running clusters and running cluster policies is actually something that needs a bit of patience. I will come back to that. Christian, can you give me the next slide? I will jump straight down to what is actually at the core of what we are working with here in Norway, and that is the big question is, who is going to finance the cluster organization and all the infrastructure needed to have an organization at the middle of the cluster? This organization is actually placed there in order to make cooperation happen. And who's going to be responsible for funding it? At one side, we have those who think that this is actually part of a public innovation infrastructure, and this cluster organization that organizes, everything that happens within the cluster should definitely be fully publicly financed. And then there is the other side who thinks that if the businesses don't see, the value of having such an organization or such an infrastructure, why should we build them at all? So that's kind of the two axes in this. And give me the next slide, Christian. So how have we solved it in Norway? The Norwegian cluster policy is a private-public partnership, meaning that if you look before 2012, we said, okay, we will give you 10 years of public cluster development support. So in these 10 years, most of the money given by the government was used to hire people, get premises, build infrastructure to support the cooperation of the clusters. And the only requirement we had was that it should be matched by in-kind. So the businesses would use their man hours to kind of match the 50-50 that we would like to see in the private-public partnership. So that was how it all started. Give me one more, Christian. And then, after 10 years, what happened? Do you know this picture? It's the most famous Norwegian picture, and it's called The Scream. And that was what happened. Because we saw that when the cluster organization started to reach the 10-year, end of the 10-year period, there was a huge scream saying, we cannot, be left alone. We need more public support. We cannot, we are not able to fund the cluster organizations by ourselves. So we need more public funding. So, and remember, we invested in the most mature and the strongest industries in Norway. So they also have a very strong voice towards our politicians. And so this ended up that we actually created a new cluster program that was active between 2012 and 2015. And that was a cluster program that was still financing the cluster organization, but we were saying that we will only support, projects going on, not only, building infrastructure and stuff like that, but we would like to see real projects, and we can support them. But Christian, if you give me one more, what we actually saw, and that was why we closed it again, was that actually they only used the money moving forward in the same direction that they had been working for the first 10 years. So it was more of the same, and not the change that we were looking for. First, in the first 10 years, we would like to invest in building the cluster, and after 10 years, we would like to invest using the cluster for projects. But the projects did not come. They were still more or less only, running the cluster with the public money. So, Christian, what did we do? First, we asked ourselves, do the clusters have a role in a modern innovation ecosystem? Because 10 years ago, there were not so many support schemes aiming at increasing the cooperation in the business. But looking at the scene today, it's a bit different. And I think Ingrid is one of the private actors that is also working very actively in an innovation ecosystem. So do we really need a cluster? And Christian, if you give me one more, I think that we ended up with the fact that yes, we do need it. And the role of the cluster in at least in the Norwegian modern innovation ecosystem is an entity that is run by the business and for the businesses. That's a very important thing. So this cannot be set out to a university or to a science park or to what. This has to be run by business for business. So if that's the case, and that we can continue to have that as a case for clusters, then there is a role for the clusters in the innovation ecosystems. That's a very important thing. The other thing is we asked us, why is the willingness for private funding so low? So we did a lot of research, and we did a lot of talking and stuff with the businesses involved in the clusters, and we asked them, why don't you want to pay? And what we saw was that many of the clusters were more like nice to have structures than structures that was really giving impact to the day-to-day business so that was why, okay, they could pay a little bit, but they were not willing to pay for the whole thing. I see that from Christine, that she said run by business for business. That's so important, and that's why we can continue to kind of support the clusters from the public side, that it's actually run by business for business. Let me have the next one, Christian. So what do we have to do in order to kind of increase the impact from the clusters? And what we saw was when we talked to the businesses that were members of the clusters, they said, it's very nice to get out there and talk to people and get inspirations and learn from others when it comes to our core. Because we do a lot of innovation by ourselves in the core, and we can have a little bit of kind of nice to have conversation with others in the core, but that's something we can take care of by ourselves. But clusters that move more towards new growth areas, how can we use the competence we have today in going into new markets? How can we create new products? How can we cooperate in, increasing our business? Then these clusters become much more created much more impact, and the willingness to pay for the cluster organizations increased dramatically. And the same, some clusters even go further and say, okay, the growth thing is pretty close to the core. It's like moving from the oil and gas industry and maybe moving over to taking what we know from the oil and gas industry and moving over to aquaculture. But what if we take what we know and move it over to the health sector and do completely different things? We actually have done that. We have taken some knowledge that we have from drilling in the North Sea and taking it into the healthcare and how we can look at weans and hearts without going into, without having an operation. So that's one explore thing. So what we see that clusters that manage to move more on the exploration and the growth side, the impact increased, and also the willingness to pay for the clusters increased. So Christian, one more. So what did we do? Well, we said we have to do two things. First of all, we have to challenge the board of directors. They are the ones who has to be in charge. We have to create good board of directors, and board of directors consisting of CEOs from the main drivers in the business, on the business area, and they need to be responsible for what the clusters is going to do. And they have to carry out that responsibility. I think before they sat there and they, some people came from the cluster organization and they tell them what they were going to do and they said, oh, this looks nice. Now we have turned it around. It is the board of directors who tells the cluster organization what they're going to do, not the other way around. And we have spent lots of time in Norway to actually make the cluster organizations understand it and make them to understand that it is the CEOs of the main businesses within the industry that needs to be in the board of directors. And if we see applications for the cluster programs that don't have CEO levels, we say no. So that's very important. Another thing that we did, and remember, going back 15 years ago, it was more about increased productivity, and it was the cooperation between established corporates and academics that were at the core. So we built a cluster program that was going to build incentives for doing research and development more in cooperation with corporates and academics, run by the needs of the corporates. That's still an important thing of an important aspect. This triple helix way of thinking is still an important part of the cluster program and the work of a cluster. But in order to really be successful as an industry in growth and explore, you need also to kind of tap into the other part of the innovation system, which is the entrepreneur and the financing of and the scaling and the financing of new growth companies. So these are the main kind of changes we made in our cluster program. So if you give me the next one, I'll give you a brief introduction to the cluster program, what it looks like today. So this is the cluster program. We have a little bit for early stage networks that are trying or thinking about becoming a cluster. We have the purple section here is where we help them invest in cluster development. We support them in building the necessary trust, building the infrastructure, building the board of directors, doing the things they need to kind of set up the clusters in a good way. And then you see this little red kind of, that means that after the purple zone, we have to move, they have to be self-financed, privately financed on kind of the maintenance or the daily running of the clusters. And from there on, we will only support the industrial shifts that they would like to carry out as a cluster. So in the purple part of this program, we help them build their clusters. When they become blue in mature clusters, we use them to solve, industrial challenges, building down barriers, opening up new markets, and stuff like that. And if you take the next one, because that's another investment that we have been carrying out, and that is a learning and development platform for the cluster organizations. The cluster leaders, the board of directors, and that is, has been really important in having the transition over from just helping businesses with running increased productivity in their core into actually starting to build new industries, build new markets, doing all these kind of new stuff and engaging entrepreneurs and growth companies and venture capital and all this. This training program that we support them with all the way through has been very important. So now I'm going to move over to the ocean industry. So if you give me this is an overview of all our clusters in Norway. And if you can see, I've kind of put a red note under all the ones that are connected to the ocean. And as you can see, there are quite many. And if you give me the next one, I'll show you some of the results that has come out of you know, working with these clusters for the last 10 years. They have been very active in creating the first electric car and passenger ferry. They were doing a pilot and a prototype among two of the clusters to create the first one. They have been working closely with the government in creating what we will say emission zones, emission-free zones at sea, especially in our fjords. So boats coming to Norway now and who wants to enter our fjord has to be able to run them by zero emission when they enter the fjords. They have created new ferries for the tourist industry. You can see in the vision of the fjords, it's a very interesting sightseeing boat that has been created. Of course, it's running on electricity. In the mid here, you can see that we do a lot of aqua farming. As Tanya told you about that yesterday. And that's one of the clusters created the first offshore sea farm. And that was a bridge between the maritime sector and the aquaculture sector, also run by clusters. Now we see that the cruise industry is starting to look at zero emission. We have several clusters working very closely with the cruise industry to see how can we help the cruise industry in being more environmental. So that's just some of the project that the clusters has taken care of. If you give me the next one, I think this sums up what the ocean industry is telling me. They say that the future for ocean industry is sustainable, it's digital, and it's autonomous. And Norwegian pioneers, because we are positioning ourselves as pioneers, we are willing to try out new things within the sustainable, digital, and autonomous area. And we are very, very open for worldwide collaboration. And I know some of our clusters is already cooperating with Canada. So I think this was my time, Christian.
Indeed it was, but I'm getting a lot of comments in the various chat channels. This is terrific. It's fantastic. We all want to go to Norway, and when can you come to Canada? No, but seriously, Christina, I know you're going to stay and run your group starting in a few minutes after Tanya, but this is really useful. And again, you emphasize the role of the clusters in this cross-sectorial collaboration between the different parts that we saw yesterday. So, Christina, thank you very much. We're going to go to Tanya for the last presentation before our breakouts. So, Tanya, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating with us again. I hope that you all can see my screen. Yes. I know that we are over time already, Christian, so I'm going to try to be really, really brief by my presentation. I think that Ingrid did an excellent presentation when it comes to how an accelerator actually works. What I would just like to focus on is that very often when we are working with startups, it's like that we have the startup community and we have the corporate community. And one of my key message to the workshop today is that it's all about trying to connect these two worlds together. And that's one of the main missions that we feel that Hatch is really working on, to be that facilitator between corporate innovation and also the startup community. Currently, we at Hatch, we are working with ecosystems globally. We are running a global accelerator program, but we also are running more regional accelerator programs. So some of the collaboration that we have with regional ecosystem is also about trying to bring that entrepreneurial mindset and support the ecosystem and cluster to build a commercialization strategy, both from the academic side and also from the startup community, encouraging more startups to enter into the ocean and the aquaculture. So that is like the main mission that we have. As Christian has been already talking about, I mean, really trying to build that commercialization capacity is all about not only working with the startups, as I mentioned, but also with the corporate. And that is what we have been built up in Hatch, is that our innovation pipeline that we have built up through our Accelerator program and investment program is also a really important pipeline for corporates. So what we really try to find is see how can we solve some of the key challenges of the industry and match them with the new solutions from the startup community. So we have our own investment fund, which is a mix of private and government funding. We have invested in 35 companies globally. 2 of them are actually in Canada. One was from our first initial investment 3 years ago, and we recently invested in a new company in our investment program now in 2020. We also have Hatch Innovation Services, which is the corporate side of things. And as I mentioned, it's all about trying to be that facilitator between really trying to see how startups can bring new solutions to the ecosystem and really try to solve these challenges moving forward. As already mentioned as well, I mean, what Hatch really tries to do is to build a larger global community. And as Ingrid also said, it's not only about the money as investors can invest into the companies, but it's really trying to build that community around them. And if you are a startup or if you are a researcher and having an idea and a company to set up, it's really challenging really to get that industry contacts or those investor contacts. And that's something that we really try to support the ecosystem, is to bring and grow their global community. So currently we actually have 100 different industry partners, investor partners that we really try to connect the ecosystems with. As we're speaking, we are currently running both a global accelerator program, running both now with startups from all continents of the world. We're also doing a regional accelerator program in Ireland, and we're also doing now a new setup in New Zealand as well. So it's all about trying to encourage and really try to support the scalability of new startups. As said, it's all about trying to be really good in understanding what are the major corporate and industry challenges, trying to identify the pains, the key challenges, and to be a good matchmaker when it comes to how can startups really solve these kinds of challenges. So that facilitator role that we play between the corporate world and the startup community is really important to drive that innovation and to increase the innovation capabilities of an industry. We also invest quite broadly into the value chain, but we don't go into these production systems. Just want to sum up a little bit when it comes to our key learnings. A lot of the work that we do is also about encouraging and also educating private investors when it comes to the opportunities that lays in the ocean and aquaculture innovation. There's a lot of private capital out there, but there's also a lot of education that needs to be done in the private sector when it comes to learnings and investment opportunities. So I think that's a really important role to play in building a successful ecosystem, is really trying to attract investors, educate investors, really try to engage investors and community to interact with the ecosystem, to understand which kind of opportunities are there. Also, when it comes to the global opportunities, I mean, what we really try to support ecosystems, that we really try to support them on a local level, but really trying to make them to think globally. For the startups, it's really important to have a global perspective when it comes to market opportunities. And also when it comes to being competitive. The COVID situation has impacted us all and changed the way we actually are doing business. So it's also really important to understand, why should a startup be connected into these ecosystems, and how can ecosystems be a support and really enable good growth communities for the startups. I know that we are over time, so I tried to keep my presentation as short as possible here, Christian, but if you have any more questions when it comes to your learnings and so, you can share more from our website on Hatchblue, and I can share it also on there. But I think we all are very impatient now to get into the workshop and discussion, and we're working on Mayo. So back to you, Christian.
Thank you very much, Tanya. And great presentation. I know you have experience from the private sector, from government side, cluster manager, and now innovation manager, and sort of bringing all that together. We are going to get you guys ready to work. Now, yesterday we had 10 groups working, and I know many of you stayed afterwards. In fact, I went back in 3 hours later, and there were still people reading around, having a look, and making some contributions. What we're going to do now is we're going to really sort of zoom in, and we're going to have you guys start on the exercise that we think is extremely relevant, which is, what do we want from the Ocean Future Innovation Hub? Now, we're going to have one part that focuses on what we call the strategic pillars. That means that we're going to start with this canvas right here, and your team leader is going to guide you through this, just as yesterday. And we want you to briefly discuss, what is the ambition? What is the ambition? And you don't have to be in agreement. You can have many parallel ambitions here. But then, and then this is the key, you have the drag and drop exercise. And the drag and drop exercise has 5 strategic pillars, or 5 focus areas. And you have to choose between the items on the side here. Now, you may say that what matters for us is more research and development. And that's actually our #1 focus area. Well, in that case, you drag and drop that over. You may say that, you know, the industry desperately needs new business models, and that's area #2. You may say that, you know, we need to upgrade our digital skills and capabilities. That's focus area #3. Or maybe someone else comes along and says, no, we need to go out and work on exports. And that's #4. So that's the exercise. And then as you proceed, a team leader can choose to either go specifically into these targets, in which case you take the Post-its and you try to be specific on targets. Or if you feel so inclined, there's a deep dive into cluster strategy right here. Now, the team leader will guide you through this. We have about half an hour, so there's plenty of time for you guys to discuss, but I need every group to align on 5 items. If you come back with 6 items or 7 items or 10 items, we're just going to push delete. Adelina, are we ready to get started?
Yes, everyone will join the breakout rooms.
Thank you very much. We need to be involving many more voices into this asset.
That's great.
All right, so we are just starting to get people back in. Emily, you know, since we had this nice little chat going, if you would reflect briefly on the discussions you had, and there's been very different discussions. So what did you guys focus on?
We had some good conversations about how to organize our thinking and our priorities. A lot of talk about how access to capital is sort of a complex area that we need to think about the different types of capital, different stages and navigating and so on. We also talked about some overarching themes that sort of overlaid over market development and capital and all of these other sort of categories for prioritization, but also major thematic areas like impact investing was brought up, and sort of climate change. decarbonization, et cetera, sort of goals around business transformation. So I think we had a very broad discussion, not enough time.
Well, let's start those conversations, and they're going to continue to evolve. Let's see, Don. We were emailing yesterday. Are you with us, Don?
I am.
So if memory serves me, you're in group number 4 of 5 with Elizabeth. Is that right?
I was in with Roberta.
With Roberta. Okay. What was some of the highlights from your discussion?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of really good discussion. I think, we focused a lot on industry transformation, new business models, and just making sure that, what we set out for, what we were looking at in the first year was achievable. And so I think we had some great conversation around what it is that the ambitions of this should be, and certainly I think the group and particularly Kate Moran were very strong on was thinking about zero carbon into the future, and if we're looking at something out 2030, 2040, how important that is to ensure that it gets incorporated into the innovation hub itself.
Great, thank you. It's fascinating to have someone with your background from the East Coast connecting into with Roberto and the team that you had. But we're gonna have 1 minute on this group right here. So you gotta help me. I think Elizabeth, this was somebody from your group, right?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of people that was muted. So it was Paul and Crystal who were talking, and a lot of other people were moving parts around. So I think we really found quite early some main targets area, and we divided amongst us, finding relevant targets under each of them, started looking at each other, but I think we were out of time, and there is quite a bit to read up on. So I think this is something that needs to be revisited and discussed. But I think transformation, Crystal was transformation is a big part. I do agree. We had not time to get into each bit of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
We can do with another 30 minutes.
Indeed. And what we always see is we always want more time, but that's fine, because this is a process. This is not the end. This is really a stepping stone in the middle, if you will. And we're going to continue with those stepping stones. So we're going to shift a little bit into what I call more on the real estate side. So you have great content, you have great ideas, and you have a lot of things that you want to put in, but how do we connect that with the building? And that's what we're going to take a quick look at. I'm going to hand it over to our friends at Urban Systems in terms of the real estate. So Sean, I can click for you if you want me to proceed.
Awesome, that'd be great, Chris. Yeah, so we'll just provide a quick overview of kind of the real estate side of things. We touched a little bit on this yesterday, and as we said, there's a wide variety of opportunities, and we're really hoping to understand more about kind of what is the best initial opportunity, and then how we might want to think long-term, as the hub evolves. As we've gone through this process, we've kind of looked at, again, going back to yesterday, integrating this Ocean Futures Innovation Hub into what's been referred to as the Arts and Innovation District here in Victoria, just north of downtown. So on the slide that Chris has here, you can kind of see the Arts and Innovation District outlined in yellow. And we've identified 5 sites, which are shown in red on this map. So as you can see, 2 sites fall outside of the Arts and Innovation District, and 3 fall within it. Currently, two of the sites. So we've got the Mark's Work World Warehouse site, which is number one here, which is a developed building with a parking lot adjacent to it. We can dive into kind of each of these in a bit more detail, but two are vacant, three are currently developed. One is currently used for ship repair and shipbuilding, and two are kind of vacant retail or soon to be vacant retail sites as well. So maybe Chris, if you can just kind of flip through, I'll give a breakdown of each one of these. So the first one we looked at is this Mark's Work World Wear. It's a building just kind of north of downtown. It's currently a retail outfit. There is potential that the lease may come up in the next year, but that's unknown at this point. This would be a good example. Again, when we're thinking about the types of spaces we want to see and kind of what the real estate aspect of this or the shared infrastructure could look like. These all offer different opportunities that might different times or different types of operations. This one here is, again, a developed site, so it would be kind of a vacant, kind of ready to go office space. As you can see, it's not located on the water, which is one of the factors that we've looked at as well. Just kind of hearing some initial feedback from stakeholders that was access to water was felt as being an important aspect of this. There is city-owned land just to the kind of to the left of the screen here, but into Victoria to the west. But you know, overall, there's limited access to kind of the waterfront here, but some potential options that could occur. Next slide there, Chris. The second site, this is the one we discussed yesterday, is the Capital Iron site and the foreshore behind kind of what is Capital Iron here in Victoria. So again, this might be more local for those who are coming from further away, may not understand the geography as well here, so I apologize. But this site is just adjacent to the Mark's site and it's on the waterfront. It's currently being used as retail, and we understand there will be an upcoming vacancy in early 2021. This site is unique in a number of ways, that there's a lot of flexibility in it in terms of having some existing vacant space available now, room for expansion, as well as access to this foreshore area, which is highlighted in red. This is potentially cleared at this point, and you can kind of see the pictures up here now. It's basically a parking lot with a breezeway connection from some of the vacant office space down to the water. So this is a lot of flexibility and a lot of room to expand, you know, and kind of could fit a variety of different formats. Just to the, we've got the area highlighted in red. You might see this big white roof just to the right of the red hatched area. That could also be available for the site as well. Next slide, Chris. So the third site is the Point Hope Shipyard. So this is the one that is located outside of the Arts and Innovation District. It's currently being used for a variety of industrial uses. It's developed currently. The site has some open areas, but generally has a little less flexibility as the existing uses are more heavy industrial and pretty important to kind of the, you know, the economic function of Victoria's Harbour, you know, at this time and for this foreseeable future. So there may be some limited opportunities here, but generally just due to the current use and the location of it outside of Arts and Innovation District, we feel the site may not represent the best opportunity, but it could be something that we look at again in the future. Again, thinking about what we maybe need in the next kind of like first 1 to 3 years, kind of 3 to 5 years, then kind of beyond that 5-year mark, and then even potentially looking, you know, longer term. Chris, if you could go to the next slide. So the fourth site is an interesting one. We talked briefly about this yesterday. It's owned by Matulia Holdings, which is a partnership between Esquimalt First Nation and Songhees First Nation. Just represents just over 7 hectares, so quite a large site. As discussed briefly yesterday, there's been extensive environmental remediation in this area, but there's also some other concerns, geotechnical concerns and others that, you know, kind of influence the site in terms of where is buildable. At this time, it's currently completely vacant. So this would represent an opportunity where it would be kind of like a new building, potentially temporary buildings, but maybe a longer term development play versus something that would be operational kind of in the near future. Chris, if you could go to the last slide, please. The fifth one is a vacant space currently at Dockside Green. So we added this one just about a week and a half ago. So this wasn't kind of in our initial review. However, we've had an organization reach out to us just to kind of take a look at it. Currently, this is part of like a larger redevelopment in Victoria West, just on the other side of the harbor. Again, this is kind of next to Point Hope Shipyards and outside of the Arts and Innovation District. It's currently an undeveloped site, which is kind of been set aside for retail and commercial development. However, there could be some flexibility to how this site is developed in the future as well. Again, this is totally vacant space and would represent kind of a long-term development play versus something that is kind of ready to go. However, located further from the heavy industry of Point Hope Shipyard, it could yield a better opportunity for something like an Ocean Futures Innovation Hub. So that's kind of the Coles notes and what we've been working on a little bit on the urban systems side for the last few weeks. And I think what we're trying to understand from this process again is what is the need now, what is the need in the future, and kind of what are some of the pros and cons of these different options that we've presented.
And thank you, Sean. That's exactly the topic for the next breakout. In the tool that you just finished, just below it, you have a blank canvas for putting in comments, questions, observations, requests, demands, and proposals. And of course, if you think this discussion is interesting, I hope you want to join us back in November. So Adeline, I'm going to go to the next breakout. We have exactly 10 minutes and 30 seconds for that. So dig into the building part. What do you want to see? What do we got to make sure is covered? You got 10 minutes. Let's go. Welcome back, everyone. Now, it's really important that even though we finish our program in 1 minute, you don't have to leave. All of you are welcome to stay right here on this board and continue to write. I know there's a lot of views on the building. Is there a need for the building? What's the business model for the kind of building? And all of those things we're going to get to. But you don't have to log off in 60 seconds. You can stay here all night or all day and continue working right here. And if you want to, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people joining you. And I'll give you a hint. If you find yourself working on this board after we close, there's a video conferencing button on the bottom. So you can actually invite people that are randomly working on this board, and you can have your own jam session all by yourself. Okay. Now, what's going to happen next is that we are going to structure the insight, and we're going to shape some recommendations. We are nowhere near any conclusions yet. What we're working on here is a process that's going to take time. But I would like to invite you that if this was interesting and valuable, and if you want to be a part of shaping this, and I hope you do, you should make sure that you join us in November. We haven't set the date yet. It's going to be middle of November, but in the middle of November, we're going to get into more of the financing. We're going to get more into the business models, and we're going to get much deeper than we had in our current program. Now, just like yesterday, as you're heading for the exits, notice that there is a space on the bottom for your key summary. So if you want to leave any comments, if you want to leave any questions, if you want to leave any reflections, like a request for Norwegian chocolate or salmon, just post it there, yeah? We'd be happy to bring it over in person, because I do encourage you. And remember, everyone can see this. And all of this is going to be shared with people that were not here today. So, for all I know, your kids are going to see this. If you're so inclined, you can also scroll down. We have a few items, a few teasers for our next conversation together. So next time we're going to go into the funding. We're going to talk about the entrepreneurial funding, the public funding. We're going to talk about funding a cluster, which is very different from funding buildings. And we're going to talk about different options. And then you guys need to be involved to shape that message. We are back in the middle of November. You will probably receive an invitation, or maybe you ban the email, what do I know? But I hope you've had a good time. I hope you've had an interesting conversation. Kerry, if you're with us, I would like to close everyone out on a digital round of applause for doing a massive amount of work in a very limited amount of time. So a big round of applause.
I love it.
Me too. So, I don't know about you guys, but we actually do this with hands, got these?
Fantastic.
Kerry, do you want to say 2 words before we close out everything?
I am so impressed with all the collaboration, the perspectives. I think it's going to help to drive this forward. It's so important that we hear from everybody, and I want to thank you, Chris, for leading this, along with all the team from Urban Systems and Hatch and everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. Please stay here as long as you want. We're going to slowly close out the video, but you can stay on the board and you can see what everybody else has been putting up. And thank you for the team leaders, and thank you for all the participants. Have a wonderful day, Canada. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.